በስመ አብ ወወልድ ወመንፈስ ቅዱስ አሐዱ አምላክ አሜን።
ኃይሌም ዝማሬም እርሱ ነው ዘላለም ከብሮ ያስከበረኝ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም፣ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም።
ክብር ለሱ ይሁን ታላቅ ነው ዘላለም።
ኃይሌም ዝማሬም እርሱ ነው ዘላለም ከብሮ ያስከበረኝ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም፣ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም።
ክብር ለሱ ይሁን ታላቅ ነው ዘላለም።
አቤቱ ጉልበቴ ሆይ አቤቱ መጽናናቴ ታትመሃል በውስጤ ተስለሃል ከፊቴ አየሁ አሻግሬ በተራሮች ከፍታ ጨለማዬን ስትገፍ ሰንሰለቴ ስትፈታ ኃይሌም ዝማሬም እርሱ ነው ዘላለም ከብሮ ያስከበረኝ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም፣ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም።
ክብር ለሱ ይሁን ታላቅ ነው ዘላለም።
ቦኪሜነ ኢየሱስ ቦኪሜነ ጌታዬ በእግሮች ላይ ይፈሳል የማይቆመው እንባዬ ናፈቀች መንፈሴ እንደ ዋላ ተጠማ ስምህን አውጄበት ይሸበራል ከተማ ኃይሌም ዝማሬም እርሱ ነው ዘላለም ከብሮ ያስከበረኝ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም፣ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም።
ክብር ለሱ ይሁን ታላቅ ነው ዘላለም።
ዲዳው አፉን ከፈተ ምርኮኛው ነፃ ወጣ ምድር ባንተ አረፈች ለተገፉት ቀን ወጣ የእምባዬ ምትክ ሆኖ ጽድቅ መንደሬን መላ የረዳኝ የሚረዳኝ ማን አለ ካንተ ሌላ ኃይሌም ዝማሬም እርሱ ነው ዘላለም ከብሮ ያስከበረኝ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም፣ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም።
ክብር ለሱ ይሁን ታላቅ ነው ዘላለም።
አቁሞኛል ግሳጼ አኖሮኛል ፍቅር ወዳጅ ያበዛህልኝ ወዳጅ ያልኩህ ጸጋ ሞልቶ ፈሰሰ የዝማሬ ማዕበል ደጅ በመንጋ ሞላ ጌታዬ ሆይ ምን ልበል ኃይሌም ዝማሬም እርሱ ነው ዘላለም
ለሱ ይሁን ታላቅ ነው ዘላለም።
ኃይሌም ዝማሬም እርሱ ነው ዘላለም። ከብሮ ያስከበረኝ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም፣ እንደ እግዚአብሔር የለም።
ክብር ለሱ ይሁን ታላቅ ነው ዘላለም። ክብር ለሱ ይሁን ታላቅ ነው ዘላለም።
Welcome back, everyone. This is Mr. Cat-Eye. In today's report, I'm going to be discussing the Grenfell Tower fire that occurred in London on June the 14th, 2017. This was, in fact, the very same date as the Memphis, South Carolina port incident involving a suspected dirty bomb involving George Webb, Jason Goodman, and that crew. This was also the day earlier in that morning when the congressional baseball game was interrupted by an act of terror where a gunman came in with a weapon and shot a number of people, to include Steve Scalise. And so with so many events going on, I showed how the Memphis dirty bomb incident was ritually coded. I showed how it involved George Webb with regard to that ritual code. But to understand where the Grenfell Tower fire fits in, because I'm always behind in terms of my observation and reports. And so I realized today is the 18th of June. This report is, of course, 4 days after the fire. And it's good because I've been busy with a number of other things, and it has allowed for certain things to develop that has allowed me to see some things, because once I applied my observation to this incident, I quickly saw how it fit into the bigger piece of the puzzle, how it is part of the bigger mega ritual conspiracy that's ongoing, how this is a response communication to Trump and his previous co-fifi, I will stand up. This was a major change to things, because it not only reinforces the established 9/21, 22, 23, and 9/24 dates that have been on the burner for quite a while, it has clearly solidified the introduction of those same dates with June and July. So 21, 22, 23, and 24 are in play in a very heavy way. And since this incident, the Grenfell Tower fire, is coded in the way that it is, it's coded into the relevant existing mega ritual, but it's going to show some things that are going to force you to think, because it's here. All you got to do is look, and if you think about what they're showing you, you're going to have to obviously think some of the same things that I came to the conclusion. Now, I'm going to show how there are relevant events linking, of course, previous to this affair, linking back to the London Bridge terror event that occurred on June the 3rd, where 3 terrorists with black pink knives were eventually shot and killed for the London Bridge terror attack. But it goes back to, of course, the May 31st Trump tweet, Kofifi, I will stand up, where all this roughly began. And since I've already reported on the Trump Kofifi findings, which led to the London Bridge findings, and I've already covered elements of the happenings on 6/14, I'm now covering the Grenfell Tower fire that happened on the 14th, and I label this burnt offerings because, unlike any most typical sacrifice, blood sacrifice, this one denotes high numbers. The numbers are indicative of the level of seriousness that the ritual offering represents. Now, the sheer fact that so many people are suspected dead in this fire, many would have, of course, succumbed to the smoke first and would have been rendered unconscious, but then the flames would eventually consume their bodies and they would have been burned alive. And for as many people to have lost their lives, and for a conspiracy to exist surrounding the true number of dead, and for the general public to be upset, they have a right to be. But there are things going on here that go far beyond typical corruption, things not being fixed, and the typical things that would lead to negligence. This is much more. This was a burnt ritual offering, and because of the high numbers of victims being offered, it denotes an offering to a deity in a major way. and they communicated a message in terms of why they sacrificed so many. Because if you sacrifice this many, they have coded into the ritual sacrifice itself through the code that's in the structure and in the fire and everything. They've coded what they want, and what they want is to ensure their success against Trump. And they're fearful, so fearful that this is a very serious representation of how serious they're willing to go. But it was a message nonetheless being sent back to Trump and the other world players, because it's only going to get worse, not better. But this Grenfell Tower fire is the biggest, largest by scale human sacrifice burnt offerings where the victims died by fire that I've seen in quite some time. I think of 9/11, the Twin Towers, when many victims, rather than stay in the building, elected to jump to their deaths. That's the same kind of scenarios that are in play here. And so I wanted to do this intro to merely set the stage. I'm going to show and give a little discussion to some background dates and events so that they're firm in your mind. And then I'm going to move on to some things, get into presenting the code, because the code first has to be presented from what the public, that means anybody, me, you, or anybody can go out there right now and do a Google search, and you would be shown certain things relative to this incident. You would be told certain facts, such as there's 24 floors. There are certain elements of facts in this event that I'm going to show where all the elements of code are, and when I show it to you, you'll understand why my comments about this being a large-scale ritual offering involving burnt offerings, human sacrifices, killed by fire, burned alive by fire, signals of a very serious evil request of their demonic deity, because there can be no benevolent deity that any group should have to sacrifice babies or innocent victims to. And so this has to be some demonic type of entity being sacrificed, where the sacrifices are given to it by those obvious demon worshippers. And so this, at this scale, the scale of this ritual sacrifice being a burnt offering is not to be underestimated. It is serious. Now, the fact that they conducted this massive burnt offering ritual sacrifice is significant, because they made a major, this is a major offering of human lives, and they're asking for a lot. And what they're asking of their evil entity is for some kind, this was a 911 call from the New World Order to their evil God to help them, to assist them. And what numbers were introduced by this fire? Now, you're seeing here 621, 622, 623, and 624. Now, the fact that this is for June, which is why I give an emphasis to these June dates, and apparently they got something in mind for 622 and 624, beginning 621. But what's important is that the building itself serves as an element of the ritual that was already in play long before the fire was ever started on this date. Advanced knowledge, advanced preparation of a ritual elements which were all necessary for this fire, for the fire to occur the way that it did. Now, last but not least, this is what I wanted to show with regard to this report, to merely show that it was in fact a burnt offering ritual sacrifice of the largest scale I've seen since 9/11. It's serious. And when you realize the seriousness of it, as I hope you do, you should realize that the New World Order made a 911 call to their demon god, asking for some type of immediate assistance with regard to defeating Trump. And to do so, to make that request, they threw in many, many, many victims, burnt offerings. That shows you the seriousness of how serious either they think they're about to lose ground, and there's no way they want to lose ground. They do not want to lose control. And I know they're going to go to all efforts to defeat Trump and his numbers and his dates. But the fact that they called up here and did this type of ritual sacrifice on the scale that they did says that they're panicked, and they offered up hundreds of lives, burnt offerings, to some type of demon entity, which makes them demon worshippers, because they're asking for his assistance in evil to overcome Trump using these numbers, beginning in this month of June. But now that they're provoking certain people and provoking certain types of responses and reaction among the masses, those responses are being gauged and monitored and studied so that they can be overcome. Because ultimately, we still have some object in space that's coming this way, dealing with these dates, and I don't know what's coming, but with everything that's been happening, I believe something is coming our way, and we're going to see it probably more sooner than later. And everything that's going on in space is leading us toward these end dates, and they're doing what they're doing with this ritual sacrifice, as large as it was, to try to ensure their success against Trump. And that's why they've done what they've done, and while they will continue to do what they're doing by whatever means necessary to ensure their success against Trump and their plans to defeat the New World Order, to bring in a new major change to the way things are done. For us, well, just a different slave master. Maybe a little more lenient, maybe not, we don't know. But if the old New World Order can't win, they're going to burn the world down with nuclear fire, and starting wars is profitable for them. That's why when they can't do what they want to make money, they start killing people, and this is a prime example. So with that being said, let this ritual sacrifice be a reminder of the level of cruelty and evil that these people can go to. Burnt offerings into the hundreds, ritual sacrifice to a demon, asking that demon for help in defeating Trump.
It is the tradition of this committee to swear in witnesses, so if you'll all stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Please be seated. Our first witness is Miss Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Miss Ali was born in Somalia and migrated to the Netherlands to avoid a forced marriage. She served on the Dutch Parliament and in 2004 wrote the script of a short film, Submission, critical of Islam's treatment of women. After the film was released, the director of the film, Theo van Gogh, was assassinated. Hirsi Ali is the author of several books, most recently The Challenge of Dawah, Political Islam as Ideology and Movement and How to Conquer It. She currently is a research fellow at the Hoover Institution and founder of the Ayaan Hirsi Ali Foundation. Ms. Ali.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to go back to the big picture. And listening to Mr. Leiter, I think you, in your capacity working in the government, you've worked very, very hard, and I really appreciate that. But I want to evaluate, if we reflect on how this government has performed since 9/11/2001 and how other Western governments have performed, my evaluation would be we have failed. We have failed. We have these small programs that, if you look at the big picture, look like small drops in the ocean. We have spent trillions of dollars. We have waged wars since 9/11. The Islamists, the radicals, whatever name you choose to call them, they have grown exponentially. Their sympathizers, the agencies, the money, the funding that they get, all of that has grown exponentially since 9/11. And if our posture on 9/11/2001, if it was, we are going to take the war to them and we're going to stop this evil, in 2017, we can barely say that we have stopped that. It has doubled, tripled, in some places it has quadrupled. We've completely failed to define the enemy. And because we have failed to define the enemy, we're flying blind. Our ambition cannot be, we are going to develop all of these programs to stop or to limit the consequences of the next attack. In 2001, it was, we're going to stand for no attack at all. If you look at some of the other countries, I'm really, really worried, and I think we don't have the sense of urgency here, worried about some of these European countries. Do you realize that France is in a state of emergency since November 13, 2015? Germany has closed some mosques. Radical right-wing groups in Europe are on the rise as they have never been. I have lived in Holland for 14 years. And when I came, there was a very small radical right-wing group. And today, it's the second largest party. In Britain, after this attack in London, the authorities said there were 3,000 people they were surveilling, but there are 20 other thousand people at large. It is absolutely true that when it comes to mounting large-scale attacks, we've made it very, very difficult for them to do that. And they may not succeed, and I hope they don't succeed. But when it comes into entering the minds of human beings and turning them into live missiles against us because they promise them hereafter, that is fantastic. That in that sense we have failed. And in that sense, because we don't get to the ideology, we don't want to talk about this problem, we are now seeing thousands and thousands of men and increasingly women who are prepared to use anything as a weapon, their cars, their knives, etc. And it is very easy for us to say, and convenient maybe, to say this is happening online. But that is not entirely true. It's still happening in the mosques. After the recent attacks in Brussels, in Germany, in France, mosques have been raided and closed. It is happening in people's living rooms. It is happening in schools. What exactly is happening? It's what I call dawah activities. It is an evangelization that is carried out by Muslims who accentuate the political military doctrine that they are raised with. And they are using that doctrine to turn people's heads and minds away from the principles Senator Harris just left. But she said, what we thought were universal decency. That is what their minds and hearts are being turned away from. And their minds and hearts are being turned away to the idea that you are doing God's work, Allah's work, to kill people, to maim, to repress, and to bring down societies. It hasn't happened in the United States. It hasn't yet happened in Europe. But there are, in fact, countries in Africa that have been brought down, countries in the Middle East that have been brought down. And I think we need to bring to this discussion, I know this is the Homeland Senate Committee, and we don't speak for the entire government, but I don't think we should walk away from this morning, this afternoon when we're done, with the idea that there is no sense of urgency. There's a great deal of a sense of urgency, and between 2001 and today, we have failed, and we have failed miserably, and it's now time to correct our course.